Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Good evening, everyone. Many thanks for your presence this evening. First of all, we are very honored by the presence of His Excellency Mr. Jérôme Cochard, French Ambassador, and we would like to thank and to express our gratitude to Dhaka and Sheikh Hamid bin Mohammed Al Khalifa, President of Dhaka and Sheikh Ibrahim Center. Thanks to them for this opportunity to organize this event, the first one in Bahrain, 6th edition in France of Nuit, Night of Idea here in the Patel House. So many thanks to the Bahrain Authority of Culture and Antiquity.
But it is under Sheikh Ibrahim Center.
And under Sheikh Ibrahim Center, of course.
Nothing to do with that.
Okay, under Sheikh Ibrahim Center. So, for this 6th edition of Nuit en français, Night of Idea, with the topic en français, proche, closer, أقرب بالعربي. The topic is about our individual and collective relationship to space and also the place of digital technology and social network in our societies. What will be the ways or the mode of sociability and our relationship with others during or due to COVID situation, because this is our daily basis reality. So to discuss this topic, it will be split on 5 subtopics or sub-themes. We are very happy, proud to have with us for this evening. So let's start by Ali Karimi, Mr. Ali Karimi, who is Bahraini architect, whose work explores social housing, public space, and the landscape of the GCC countries. We are very proud to have this evening Ocean Saïd. He is PhD candidate in sociology at Sorbonne Nouvelle University and the founder of art platform, gallery, called Hunna بالعربي, and Hunna in French, transliteration but in French. معناها elle au pluriel. Of course, everyone here knows Dr. Ali Flouti. Ali Flouti, media consultant at the Bahrain Authority for Culture and Antiquity. He received his PhD in media from the University of Paris. And we have our friend Ali Bezaz, who is artist, writer, owner of gallery. He's Bahraini, and we used to work together before COVID situation and during the COVID situation, and we hope after the COVID situation. So please, I would like to say that we are very lucky to have this friends for the panel to discuss this topic today. Nuit Night of Idea is like French event. This is the 6th edition, and it's organized by Institut Français, French Institute in Paris. So now we have everywhere, all over the world, panel like this or other events about this topic, and this is the first one here, first time, sorry, here in Bahrain. So let's start with the first point. We have observed, sorry, because without my, okay, it's not easy. We have observed a profusion of, let's start like that, of fake news, intox, conspiracy theory, and a general distrust, manque de confiance of the world. So maybe for OCM to start, how did you experience this period of global pandemic, of COVID situation? What have been his repercussions in your life? And the question will be for everyone.
Good night, everyone. So, first of all, I would like to thank the Alliance Française for this invitation for tonight of the round table. This is quite a challenging question to start with, because obviously I think that the pandemic crisis have had many impacts in terms of political, cultural, economical aspects of our life. And it's still very hard so far to really understand or have a clear perspective about the depth of those changes. Yet, on a very personal level, I can replay taking three kind of experience. My first experience is the one as an academic. The second one is as an art professional. And then the third level is much more personal and individual level. So the effect of the pandemic or the COVID crisis on my research, for example. So as you say, I'm doing a PhD, and my PhD is pretty much based on the observation of the practice of people who do politics, in my case cultural diplomacy, which does imply to go on the field, to be on the field, to observe and to analyze the daily practice of the cultural diplomat. So when the lockdown started, I was in Kuwait at that time, the first lockdown, and all of a sudden I was not able to carry my researches anymore, like most of the people are researchers anyway. So I tried to develop some new strategies, such as doing interview by Skype, by Zoom, or also following some classes or giving classes on using digital technologies. And definitely it was not, it's not that it was not a good experience, it's just that it totally lacked the depth that I used to have when I could have a material and physical experience with my research. So this was the first level. On the second level, actually, has been quite interesting for me, the crisis, COVID crisis, because it has given me the impetus to launch the art gallery. So my art gallery is a digital gallery, so we are exactly the target of the subject tonight, in which I work with a woman artist from the Arabian Peninsula. And it was interesting because most of those artists, not all of them, but most of them, I met them actually through Instagram. So there was already the kind of a use of the new technology or social medias in my work. But what has happened in the cultural or the art sector is that we have seen the emergence of new practices that were kind of already existing, but not at such a big scale, where we have seen a lot of galleries, art institutions who have started to develop their presence online and to try to reach a wider audience by doing so. And I will finish with the third level quite quickly. On a personal level, the COVID crisis has really led me to think about what are social interaction, how important are social interaction in our daily life, and as a part of a society. Like, can we live in a society where pretty much everything is now digitalized, dematerialized, where everything can happen from distance, only through a screen, So that was a question that he also raises for me, but I'm sure we will talk about them in the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Ustad Ali, how did you cope with this COVID situation during all this almost 12 months?
Echo Sam's point. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for all being here. Maybe to kind of address also a little bit the first question, the idea of this, the kind of fake news or the global news. One of the interesting things that is at least emerging from the perspective of even an architect is seeing that for the first moment in history, we're able to kind of the field of comparative governance. We're suddenly have this explosion of data, right? Suddenly, all governments across the world are able to compare their responses to a single phenomenon. The amount of vaccines, the amount of cases, the amount of tests, the amount of beds and respirators. There's suddenly been a deluge of kind of quantitative information that we're able to assess and compare, and then suddenly not only model, but say, well, these cases are successful and these cases have failed. And then, similarly, this kind of deluge of data has trickled down, and as a mentality also within architectural circles, right? So many restaurants are praising distances between tables, the amount of capacities, the densities in restaurants. And yet, that same kind of interest in the metric has also diluted conversations on qualitative qualities of space. So, yes, you may have the outdoor seating, but what are the qualities that we're looking for? When you have someone who's looking to commission a house, there's an understanding now of a certain number of rooms that they might need that have become unavailable in the public realm. So the park that I no longer have, maybe suddenly the garden of my room, the gym that I no longer can access is the gym of my house. But it's interesting that it's come at the cost of real kind of qualitative questions, and it's why it's interesting to have this conversation today, where the question of the qualities of life and the qualities of space have suddenly made way for the metric. It's almost a kind of second kind of modern movement, where the first modern movement may have been in response to tuberculosis or kind of medical conditions. Now it's the second kind of return of these quantitative metrics into space, at the cost of a lot of qualitative qualities of life, which is what does it mean to live? I think that's been one of the kind of main questions that's been lingering over the past year for me.
Yeah. I was thinking about it personally. I have like positive and negative aspects. The negative, perhaps, is especially for oriented person. I missed hugging and kissing and meeting with people every day and inviting many people to my place every day as well. And I noticed that we had such a beautiful life before, and hope we'll have it later on. And I appreciate more and more our lives. The second part is the positive thing is, for me, I had more time for myself. I did perhaps courses of music, painting, new language to learn, etc. Then we can even benefit from a negative situation. But not easy to live without people, and without meeting people and being with others. It's a hard time. It was a hard time at the beginning. Now perhaps after 1 year we're used to, but hope we'll have a normal life soon again.
Thanks, Dr. Ali. Dr. Ali himself.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know, because it is like Dr. Ali said, it has two, like a positive side and a negative side. And I think positive side that this pandemic gives us a lot of time to think about a lot of things, and to rethink about our style of life and our relationships, especially like me as a father, or a lot of people as a parent. And I think it makes me closer to my family, and to discover a lot of gaps that maybe I had in their relationship with them. But I think the negative side is this pandemic forced us, I think, to use more technology, more like programs, applications in our life, and also it's not only us and the kids. I think the more dangerous goes for our kids because already they use a lot of technologies and applications. Maybe I'm afraid of like a pandemic that we go to like depend on a lot of the technology more and more, and like we lose the warmth of like seeing each other and meeting each other. But in the end, I think it depends on me or anybody that how we can see the crisis and how we can use the bad situation to our like, side.
Thank you, Hani. Let's now see this point. Some sociologists speak about a world without contact, a world of isolation and loneliness since the beginning of this pandemic. Will this contactless world become the norm, la norme? How else to become closer again to remain in the same topic? So some media sociologists are talking now about this un monde sans contact en français. Un monde sans contact, comme la carte bancaire sans contact, contactless world. So
First,
say this way.
Okay, since I don't have a choice, I think it's important to underline the fact that with the COVID crisis, it did not bring a rupture of a new kind of approach of technology in our life. Like we are already using new technologies or digital technology on a daily basis. What has changed or made an evolution with is I think the acceleration and the broadening of the spectrum of activity, daily activity, for which now we do rely on digital technology. So, for example, I don't know, before if I wanted to buy some food or buy anything, you go to the store and then you wait in the queue and then you pay and then you go home and then you cook and you eat your food. Now everything can be delivered at your door, the food but also plenty of things, which implies that most of the time you don't meet with the other. Even though when we have the food delivered, sometimes they just leave it in front of the door or on your doorknob, and you don't even see the person or interact with the person who has brought the food to you. The food or any other things, it doesn't matter. What does that imply? I think it's quite an interesting question, because when you go in the world, literally and physically in the world, you have a permanence to negotiate your way of being and your way of being in relation to the other. Obviously, like, even if sometimes waiting in the queue can be really annoying, sometimes you can also just like have a little chit-chat with someone you didn't know and it brings something new in your life. Or then maybe you meet someone and then your day that has a very planned kind of schedule will totally change because you will add something new. This kind of space for improvisation, for to escape the planification, I think has much disappeared during the COVID crisis. But the COVID crisis is not supposed to stay forever, I guess. But it's also the question, like, even if the crisis passes, what are those kind of new practice or new automatisms that we have been developing over the time that will stay with us? And we will be able to actually come back to a kind of life where we accept that we have sometimes to be confronted to the otherness, to our daily life. Because it's really easy to just, you want to talk to your friends, you just talk to your friends. Or
I find this extremely exciting because those were tendencies and trends that had already occurred, right? Students studying abroad for other reasons. And I think really means that as someone who's local, you have to completely reevaluate your value proposition. Is my value proposition now that someone can Zoom call any architect? Is it about a certain type of architecture? Is it about a certain way of thinking? Or is it a certain, just the latency where I'm able to kind of interact on a regular basis? And I think that to me is one of those things that's emerging. I think if you're designing furniture in Bahrain, suddenly you're thinking, well, what does it mean to design something locally? Both on the level of economies of scale, locally available materials, but also what does it mean when I can order a piece of furniture via IKEA and receive it within a relatively amount of time? And I think that's, to me, the question that's going to keep coming through with COVID. This is a response to globalization, not to necessarily the context of Corona. It's just that I think Corona has accelerated what has been going on so quickly that we're emerging in a context where we would have otherwise been 10 years down the line, where suddenly we have to confront the value propositions within 2020 rather than maybe 2030. And I think it's a great shock because suddenly as an actor in the economy, you have to say, well, what was I doing on a global level anyway? Rather than making my money off a certain cheap labor cost or a certain kind of proximity or a certain local market. I think it's like you have to wake up and realize, well, I'm competing with the global. And as Bahrain too, I think on the scale of the country, you realize, well, what are we doing locally and how do we compete now that the global market, well, it's changed, but also now that it's a completely global market.
Yeah. Thanks God that COVID is came in 2020 and 2021, and not in 1990 and 1995 without social media. In media, we speak about the global village where we live. We don't have any more distances and borders. I can be in direct contact with a friend or a member of my family in the US or in China or in Lebanon, everywhere in the world. Then, for this reason, physical contacts are so important, sure, but we live now not lonely, because we're in contact even more than before with all our friends and families, and I can have and give courses in a big university, thing that we couldn't do like before COVID. Now we have all the offers from the world, from Harvard and from Sorbonne, from all the universities. Without being there, I can have them. These universities are closer today because of COVID, perhaps. And thanks God that COVID is now and not 20 years back. Let's take the positive aspect as well.
I think it's also depends on the generations, because like me or like older people, I have an aunt. She's always complaining about sitting at home, and it's difficult to go outside and to see the places she usually used to go, and she still didn't satisfied with contacting people through Zoom or whatever, and it's like she wants to hug them, to kiss them, to talk with them physically. But for me, it's much easier than here. And for my kids, it's already they used to use that technology and to talk to each other through that technology. And I think it depends on the generation. And but throughout this year, I think we all learn a lot of things about technology and how to use it, and maybe how to make our life easier than before.
Any feedback or questions from the public? Okay. So, thank you, Ali, for this point. Let's continue with now a philosopher, German philosopher Herbert Rosa, who is this year the godfather, the parent of the Nuit des Idées 2021. And he is talking about the modernity and the principle of the modernity. And the main principle of the modernity for this philosopher, Helmut Rosa, is the idea of the modernity make everything available, make life available. This is the main principle of our modernity. We are used to have everything available, and our life will be massively available because of or due to the modernity. So the problem with the COVID situation that now we look like powerless. So my question is, in your opinion, in your view, how powerless are we in the face of the situation? Considering that before, maybe like before, everything was available and our life was always available.
This is maybe a point where I both agree and disagree with Dr. Ellie about kind of the previous answer, and kind of to tap into the question you just raised. I mean, on one hand, maybe thank God that we have experienced Corona in this moment, where the speed of vaccination, the speed of hospital, the quality of healthcare service, availability of international shipping lanes to provide respirators and anything we need quickly is fortunate. But also, COVID is a symptom of the global economy, right? It's a symptom of forces that have been accelerating over the past 20 years. I mean, the deforestation in China, the acceleration of people moving and taking up forest land and inhabiting it, food issues in various countries that have allowed for the sudden and quick interaction of animal species that should not have interacted. I mean, in what context, but the current context of the global economy, can a pangolin, a bat, a fish, and a human being inhabit the same context within meters of each other? That proximity and density. And then for that person carrying the vector to be within San Francisco in a 24-hour context could only be in this context. So, to me, the corona is more a symptom of a larger trend than as something which has happened to have occurred simultaneously. And so, I mean, to me, this is also the question where, not to say that we've been affected by it, I would almost put it the other way. It says we've enabled a certain way or modality of living which has produced this virus. The same one which has produced and allowed the spread of diseases that have been managed better by the WHO. So, for example, Ebola a few years ago, or avian flu. And so, the real question is, okay, we might not have control over what has happened with the pandemic, but we have very much set in motion the economic and the lubrication of human beings, animals, and living matter that has allowed this thing to spread so quickly, and which will continue to allow these things to spread quickly. So I think really it's not only just a chance to revisit the mechanisms that we have to protect our society, but also what self-imposed limits have we put in place that naturally just protect our society, for both economically, culturally, and of course in terms of safety. So it's for that reason that I say, if we consider it a symptom of a certain modality that the world has been changing and flattening into, then we suddenly have way more agency over this crisis, because it's the same reason an architect can come to a building in Bahrain and leave. It's the same reason why a virus can spread from Wuhan to Alaska within the course of a year, which would have otherwise been almost unfathomable in the course of a year.
I think on one side it's like expose or like the illusion of the all, and especially the government and like even the big companies that they control everything and they can deal with any like crisis in the world. And but this pandemic like exposed that everybody is like in certain level are powerless, and but on the other hand, if you face a new challenge that force you or like forces you to find solutions another ways to overcome this problem or crisis. But I think it's we have to remember every time that the limit, the power is in the end is limit. Nobody has an unlimited power in the world.
The Nuit is that we can agree or disagree with our parent, with our godfather as well. I think that with this situation we can have more sometimes information, or for example, I will take our example at the Bahrain Authority for Culture and Antiquities. Because of this situation, we've put all our concerts on air, online. We've put our e-library, we improved our e-library. We've put our oral history, we have special oral history videos aimed to preserve the intangible heritage of Bahrain. We've put them all online as well. Then we have the positive thing as well, that we have done things that we couldn't or we didn't think about them before. Then I disagree a little bit with Mr. Rosa.
How about Rosa?
Rosa. Sure, it's so important to have everything all the time. We had it before COVID, but even after COVID or within this period, we have more opportunities because of COVID as well.
Best question, but yeah, I would like to come back on what Ali was saying, because I do agree very much that actually we cannot really understand these values of its ramification on the circulation, the fact that it has been circulating between countries, places, and all of that, without considering the modernity in which we live in, which is much like a global capitalist kind of society that has allowed these values to circulate so fast and to be found worldwide. So are we more or less in front of that? Yeah, I guess that we are pretty much more or less on a very individual scale. But we still have some power. But are we using this power? Because even before the COVID crisis, there is a lot of other crises that we have, climate change being one of the very big crises that we should just talk about. Are we more or less in front of in the face of climate crisis? Yes and no, I guess. We can take some action as individual and try to reduce certain kind of consumption or recycle and everything, but there is also a change that needs to happen on a global level. I think that for the COVID crisis, it kind of shows the same problematic. Each of us can act as an individual organization and been developing a lot of new strategies to deal with the economical struggle, or for example, the absence of audience for the cultural event. All those strategies that have been very vital and very necessary for organizations to survive, also for artists, for example. To continue to produce their art, to sell their art, and to have an economy that is much needed in this financial crisis. So there is also strategies, but the question of power is not an easy one, because we do have some power, but do we use it, and how do we use it, and will the COVID crisis actually kind of give us an impetus to make some change towards this globalization and that aspect of it, let's say. All those questions, we still have to think about them, and maybe the COVID crisis is a good time to really think about them and start testing them and try to find some answer too.
Would like to add something?
One of my close friends is a big conspiracy theorist, and one of his kind of arguments against vaccination was that, it happened so quickly. And I told him, I think it's so funny because conspiracy theorists are willing to accept that it happened so quickly and therefore must be a conspiracy, but not the other way around, which is, isn't it funny that we could come up with a vaccine for these things so quickly, and yet why haven't we been able to mobilize the same resources to solve equally pressing things? Alzheimer's, cancers. There are many kind of more solvable issues that had there been that mobilization, this organization could have been equally dealt with. And so I think it's like the kind of reverse conspiracy theory is also where the power comes in. I mean, one of the things that we've seen now, I think even in Bahrain in the past year, the return to public space, the use of public amenities, public parks are returning in such big use, and outdoor spaces. And I think, well, now that we kind of take this opportunity to understand that these spaces aren't only valuable to the individual, but really are crucial to the functioning of our societies. On the level of health, they're really almost issues of public security. What happens when we have no waterfronts for joggers? I think it's really a second chance to one of the major conversations that have been occurring right around this time corona stuff was privatization of some public parks, and now it's really a chance to say, well, one of the things to empower healthcare could really be to revisit some of these public spaces, or to revisit a lot of these, and I mean this across the board. So I think that's where also a lot of power comes in, the ability to kind of organize and say, to like revisit some of the changes that have happened and say, you know what, we can design for better outdoor spaces in Bahrain, to really emphasize the qualities of being in Bahrain. And now in the context of Corona, we can revisit this. You know what, maybe not another mall, maybe better outdoor spaces, not only for a public level, but now that we've organized and seen the potential of these spaces, we've seen the value of them, we can kind of continue to build on them. And that's one of those things that, on a small scale, is really possible and well within our capacity as a society.
Deeply affected by the crisis, like most of the sectors anyway, obviously, like we can talk about education, we can talk about the health sector and everything. But in the cultural sector, there was a lot of strategies, of new initiatives to try to put culture back at the front of the line, let's say. And what I found was interesting was usually culture or art tend to be seen as something that is a bit superficial or something that is not essential. And there was actually a few surveys in France, for example. They did a survey among some French regions, and they found out that 89% of the respondents were declaring using during the lockdown daily cultural goods, so it could be reading a book or anything. And what I think is interesting to underline is that actually this is crazy, that's the moment where we can think what are our essential. And I think that art is actually, and I'm also talking about art because we are mostly from a cultural background, so it's good to have this perspective today. The way the artist or the organization can be advocate for social justice, can bring new narratives, give us a lot of space to use our imagination, to feel something, to have some emotion, in a moment where most of our emotion, movement were actually almost being impossible because we were stuck. And since I'm in Bahrain, the experience is a bit different because here we are not in a lockdown. In France, we were in a full lockdown and so for 3 months. Then again 3 months, which means like being physically locked in a space with a very small chance of actually meeting people and doing some activities. Here it's a bit different. And on the way I was saying how it was nice to see so many people running on the road and like walking because there is some kind of activity. Anyway, to kind of cut it short. So yeah, I just think it's a good moment to rethink what is essential and to, as individuals, so kind of exert our right and our duty to kind of rethink what should be like, what should be put at the front line in our societies, and culture should be definitely part of it.
About the cultural art, I think this pandemic, I think it helps a lot of people that maybe they couldn't reach the galleries and the different spaces that work with culture and art. And maybe it's difficult to them to go or to contact with these people. And in this year, I think it's helped them to be in contacting with these spaces, we say, And I think for the people who is working in these places, it is a chance to see a lot of people that maybe it's difficult, maybe we discover them in the normal situation. Contacting through this multimedia, Instagram, whatever, I think it gives us a chance to know new people and new talent people. I think as a human, there's a nature in ourselves that it's difficult to live alone and in loneliness. And there is, I think, a nature of resistance to be alone. And whatever happened, I think we will move forward to see each other and to meet in any way. And I think during this year, a lot of ideas comes to overcome this situation.
So, thank you so much. So now we have a few minutes if you want to ask a question or something. The panel is available. It's up to you.
Hello, myself. I can this is start. So my question is for the panel. I'm just kind of wondering if anybody can talk about perhaps the future of work and what the future of work might look like now that the coronavirus pandemic has really reshaped a lot of what are essential and non-essential services in society, but also reshaped migration patterns, especially in development. So I'm just kind of wondering more broadly what our relation to production and to work might look like with the future coming in. Thank you. Is it okay?
I can speak about journalism, for example. Soon we will close all the newspapers. It's already done in many countries. We'll have e-journalism. For example, in this field, we have more e-journalists, more than real journalists, more than real papers and newspapers. And many fields, I think, I don't know for architecture or other fields, what they change and re-change. One day we would have it, but the COVID time increased this to be done. This is, for example, for media journalism.
I think for culture and art, and it moved a lot of things from the physical things and spaces of galleries and to show their works on the walls of the spaces to the virtual galleries or shows, and it changed the way of working. But I think that still the artwork is done on the material they used to use for painting or for artworks. But how do we show the works, artworks, little bit comes different. Yeah, I think,
So because we already talked about the question of journalism and art, and obviously in art, for example, as we already said a few times before, there have been a lot of new strategies, but if we go to the question of the work in itself and the future of work, I think there has been two kinds of movements during this crisis. With the first movement, where a lot of jobs, actually jobs that usually require to go to an office, to work, to be physically present in an office, all of a sudden the presence itself of the worker was not essential in the sense where you could remotely work, so work from your home, and kind of do most of the tasks that you usually do within your workspace at home. But this doesn't apply only for certain category of work, and obviously a lot of people who are working, people who build things, build city roads, or people who work in the healthcare system, or healthcare system, like all of those works that actually need people to be present. I'm not sure whether or not they will evolve, but the thing with the other works that cannot be done remotely, I think it's quite an interesting question because the more we start to work at home, the more we kind of have a little blurry lines between what is personal and what is professional life. For example, before, obviously a lot of people keep writing emails or research job obviously don't usually have like usual desk schedule. But right now, it's sometimes I found myself working until 2 in the morning, whether it's on my researches or on the gallery, and it doesn't have this kind of clean lines that we used to have. So, I don't know, maybe at some point we start talking about screen deconnection or something else, even like in the workplace. But the other question regarding the essential worker, I think it's a question we have to see, but they will stay. They are essential, but we see them less and less because ourselves are less and less going in the world in the time of the COVID like this. Question over.
Feedback? Yes?
Sir, you mentioned earlier that by disturbing the natural processes of nature, you mentioned that by disturbing the natural processes of nature, by connecting the world through air travel and sea travel, we made it much more possible for coronavirus to spread more quickly. And I wondered what the panel thought about that we made progress, modern progress, by disturbing natural processes like that. And I wondered if you think if it's worth it, if modern and urban progress is worth disturbing natural process and opening ourselves to risks like coronavirus.
It's a great question. I mean, I think, at least for me, I mean, this is kind of from my own perspective, I think it's worth also talking about progress not being kind of an arrow or a vector this, in this case in terms of the kind of direction and magnitude rather than about the virus. But it's not an arrow which applies universally to everyone, but rather also the benefit of a few actors in a few cases. So for example, I don't know, constructing a pipeline might benefit the company, but not an indigenous population. So I do think there's forms of, and this is one of the discourses that we need to have now, there's forms of progress that they're not equally shared. I mean, to answer maybe the question about work through this one, I mean, there's work, and there's, I think one of the things that we begin to see increasingly, that also has begun maybe in the last 10 years, is within the kind of the context of the gig economy, right? So on one hand, there's the freeing up of employees that are no longer in a taxi company, but can contribute their own car and work their own hours, and whether this is kind of people working in shipping or Alibaba or Uber, we're seeing on one hand the unlocking and the ability to kind of participate in the global economy on a personal basis, but with that comes completely new forms of precarity. I mean, in the sense that the guys that would have been unionizing 50 years ago are suddenly individual actors, the people that would have been under an insurance plan and dental plans by tech companies suddenly work in small offices in San Francisco or at their home in the Bay Area. And so for me, the two are tied. There's progress as a kind of society, but I also think it's really lopsided, and it's sometimes difficult to split up the kind of the precarities that are produced by progress for corporations and the cost of the individual. And I think that's also one of those things. I mean, there's the future of work as a society, but then there's always these moments where I think you look back and say, what's actually being gained and how is it being gained across the whole. I mean, sometimes it does come with these precarities, but in fact it's not progress. And sometimes, and I wonder about this now, when looking around and seeing how many Alibaba drivers there are. On one hand, it's a boom for maybe the restaurant industry in the context of the collapse of kind of in-house dining, but are these the right jobs? Is this the right kind of conditions? Are these people getting the right kind of coverage as workers, or do they fall under this kind of new into economy of precarity, where we just kind of branded as freelancing or the gig. And I think that extends to also the questions of nature. I mean, there are benefits for companies under the veil of progress and digitization, but they really kind of are singular interest sometimes.
Last one. So, mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. Jumana Al-Qassab. She is a Bahraini writer, and she will be reading for us text in Arabic. Text will be translated to French soon, very soon. The text is written for our literacy project with all Alliances Françaises all over the world to write something about closer, about posh. So, تفضلي جمانة.
مصافهم لعله في باطنه تسجيل للوحدة حتى يمسك أحد ولو من خلال صوت دونته فتتحول قراءة الآخر لك إلى لحظة مشتركة. لقد قدمت لي الكتابة ذلك، قدمت لي أن أصغى حين أفشي أعمق غرفي الداخلية دكنة، حين أتجلى كوحوش مبرحة. قال لي الآخرون أنا ذاك الذي تشيرين إليه، كما شعرت بها مرارا حين قرأت كتابا حميما أو سمعت نصا يتقطع مع الخفي الذي يحس ولا يقال. لا يجعل ذلك مني كاتبة، لكنني ما أزال أقبض بشدة على المحاولة. مشاكستك كتابة ترضيني، تقول لي من يكتب الرسائل في هذا الوقت؟ فأضحك، أنا أكتب الرسائل. أعرف أن الرسائل التي تصل إلى مثلك تهترئ في انتظارها. أعرف أنك قارئ كسول، وهذا ما يجعلني شغوفة بالكتابة إليك، لأن الوقت الذي يمضي بين كتابة الرسالة وقراءتك لها كافٍ ليجعلني شخصاً آخر متحرراً من سطوة ما كتب، شخصاً قادراً على المضي خارج لحظة الفضح التي حدثت في رسالة. تعرف، تذكرتك اليوم أمام سؤال طرحته: ما الذي يجعل لحظة ما لحظة مهمة؟ كنت قد قضيت يومي في المعتاد وضمن تمارين الوصف الذهنية التي أقوم بها. وقفت فجأة أمام نفسي على انعكاس زجاج سيارتي. كنت طفقت عائدة من المقهى بعد أن قضيت دقائق غير مستقرة فيه، رغم أني جئت بنية المفروض. قلت في وصفي: فتاة تطفح بالذهب. أو ربما فقط ما دهمني هو اكتظاظ المكان، الأعين التي لا تأبه بك، كل في فقاعته بسماعاته أو بأي شيء يفعل. استحضرت فكرة المقاهي القديمة في الستينات، حيث يدور الحديث وتتقاذف الفكرة. هل كان الاتصال الإنساني حينها أكثر إمكانية؟ لماذا؟